What's up, everybody, and welcome to Health Over Everything podcast, the number one podcast in health and fitness. I'm your host, SoCal Gula.
And I am Stephen Z. And today we are going to be talking about psychedelics.
Oh, trippy. Man, so psychedelics, you just see things, huh? Is that the whole thing about it? Just tripping out?
Well, the visuals are just one aspect of it, but I feel like the mind aspect of it is the more important part of it.
The mind.
Yeah, because of course, everyone, you could take psilocybin or MDMA and go to a rave and have fun, and that be the end of it. But for me, I'm more interested in the introspective part of it, kind of taking the journey within yourself, and I guess ultimately getting to know yourself a little bit better, getting to confront your demons.
Crazy. So, yeah, in this podcast, we are going to be talking about psychedelics, as you guys heard right now. But that trips me out. People do psychedelics and go to raves.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do psilocybin and go to any social gathering or kind of a bar, a rave, just because, especially at the higher doses, you don't know how you're gonna act. You don't know if other people are gonna freak you out, or maybe you'll get paranoid. Oh, people are looking at me. Oh man, everyone knows I'm shrooming right now, and it might make you feel uncomfortable. So being by yourself might make you feel uncomfortable too. But if you're a newbie to it, I would recommend having a trip sitter. I think that's a little bit for your own physical safety, but I think it's more of a psychological thing that, if you're freaking out, if you're going to do something bad, you have someone there, they're sober, they're looking after you. So if you're a newbie to the game, I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, and to start this podcast off as well, too, we're going to talk about psychedelics, which is a drug, even though, we're health over everything. But there is a lot of research that needs to be done in mushrooms and shrooms in general. I just watched a Netflix documentary, and there's tons of different kinds of mushrooms out there. And they really don't know much about different kinds of mushrooms and what they can do. But they're an amazing plant, right? And then they could do a lot of health things that we might not even know of right now. And everything breaks down through fungus. Everything breaks down when something dies, it eats your skin and everything, every organic matter. These shrooms break that down, so they have a compound in them that does something like that. But they have an amazing capabilities, and some make you trip out, and some can kill you, and some you can eat. So there's mushrooms are very vast and very there's probably some mushrooms out there, so many of them that people don't even know about yet, that what they could do. So that's kind of what we're talking about it today for. And also Steven has done it a few times. I have never done psychedelic mushrooms. Steven has, and he knows a little bit more about it. He studied it. He's experienced it. He knows a lot about it. So we're going to be asking him questions too and see what he got to say about it. So Steven, take it on from here. What is psychedelic mushrooms?
Well, basically it's psilocybin. That's the part that gets you to trip out. I was going to add too that it's funny that you're saying that it's a plant, but I think it's more closely related to the human than it is a plant. The way it breathes.
It's not even a plant though; it's a fungus, right? Or
like a fungi.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard Dennis McKenna was talking about it. Oh no, wait, who's that other guy? Paul Stamets. He was talking about how it's more closely related to mammals, like a living mammal, than it is to a plant. The way I don't know all the science behind it, but I just kind of recall him saying that.
Who's that McKenna person?
Dennis McKenna is Terrence McKenna's brother. So Terrence McKenna, I don't know. I think a lot of people think about him as the godfather of psychedelics. He's the guy that was it. Rogan is probably either Rogan, but Rogan might have been talking about him when he was talking about the DMT experience, which we'll get into that a little bit later. But that is a crazy experience. That's a mind job.
Which I have done DMT before, so that is something I have done it twice. Once by choice, once by accident. We'll get into that later, but right now we'll just stick on the shrooms.
Yeah, that's not a good one to do on accident.
Yeah, that was a crazy experience. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I haven't done a lot of mushrooms. I never went through a phase where I was doing them every day. I'm 40 years old now, and I probably have done it, I'm going to say maybe 15 or less times throughout my whole life.
That's a lot to some people.
Yeah. And the last time I did it, a heavy dose, it's probably at least 2-3 years ago. So
And
It's
then what
not.
is a heavy dose? Because I know I kind of know where you've been because I was at your house one time hanging out with you when you done a heavy dose, and it was a pretty crazy experience just watching you.
Yeah, the heavier doses are, I know I kind of prefer them because the lower doses, like you can still maintain yourself. You could go out, maybe have a conversation. But when you start doing like 5 grams and up, like things get more swirly. I feel, I don't know, your kind of ego dissolves a little bit more. And for me, like that's ultimately like I like that like feeling like I remember hearing one guy said like, yeah, it's not a really good selling point with psychedelics, but he was like, one of the best experiences that you can have with it is thinking that you're going to die or that you are dying. And having that thought, I feel is a pretty common experience with mushrooms. Like I've had it even like after I got to the point where I consider myself more like a veteran, it was like I would still be like, am I dying right now? Like I would just have the thought, like deep down, I know I'm not dying, but I'm
Yeah.
still questioning that because it feels like I am. And I think that kind of has to do with like people call it like an ego death. It's like your
Okay.
ego is dying, it's like dissolving, you're becoming nothing. So it feels like a piece of you is dying. It's like everything that you can identify with is slowly slipping away. So once you're left with like nothing, it's almost like you're just like a pure awareness, just witnessing
Yeah,
the experience.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
had a
weird
friend
one.
that did it, and did it once, and he said he saw Freddy Krueger, and I don't know if he was dying or not, but he said he flipped the fuck out, and he was just like, "Don't ever do it. It's crazy." But then I also hear people say things like, "Okay, if you do it in a control, like kind of like what your mentality is when you go into it. If you're going in afraid and you're
Yeah, the
scared of a lot of
set and
things,"
setting.
and he was by himself too. He's like, "Yeah, I was by myself. I started seeing Freddy Krueger, and I was scared." I'm like, so I don't know. Like,
I wonder if it was like his first time doing it.
I think it might have been. I don't know.
Because if you go into it too, like, brand new, you don't know really what to expect, maybe what your friends have told you, but you can never know like I've done it plenty of times and like every experience is different. Some of them are more introspective, some of them more visuals, and they're all different. So, and I kind of, I always recommend too, like if you're gonna do it when you're like in a good state of mind. Don't do it like after your dad passed away or something like that, and you're going through like an emotional turmoil. Like that's gonna magnify it, and that's could necessarily, it might be a bad thing if you do it under those conditions.
Yes, and the Health Over Everything podcast, which we're all listening to right now. Um, what kind of health benefits does it have? Because, like, for one thing, I know they say that it could probably like it can cure like alcoholism, like doing shrooms. I
Yeah,
don't know if just
addiction.
once or doing it multiple times, but they said it could like cure alcoholism, like something in a brain, like kind of like a gene or something. I don't know what it is really, but can it do that,
Hmm.
or what is some medical benefits from
I don't know
doing
if there's
shrooms?
anything like in the chemical that's gonna get you to stop your addiction, but I heard it described pretty well by Michael Pollan, and he was describing it like think about like you're going down a hill that's covered with mountains. You're on your snowboard, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, and after a while you create these grooves, like your thinking, your patterns, your habits,
Mm.
and after a while you'll anytime you kind of try to stray off the path, like the grooves pull you in, your habits pull you back into the groove. So it's very hard to start a new path. And with psychedelics, he's like, think of it like a fresh layer of snow got laid down on top of the mountain. And now you can make a new path. He's like, it kind of gives your
Wow.
brain like I think it's called like neuroplasticity, where you can, I guess, rewire your brain to a certain degree.
Yeah, that makes
I
fucking
think I think
makes sense.
that's probably what's doing it, not necessarily like a certain chemical within the mushroom that's helping you. It's probably that is getting you to think and see things differently. Like that was a
Wow.
big one. I remember one of the probably like my third time doing it. I was by myself and I kept having this thought, and it was just like a loop. And it was
When's the first time you did it?
shoot, the first time I did it was at my house in Southridge with
How old were you?
shit. My dad was still alive. I was probably 18.
Okay, so the third
Yeah, that
time was
was
like how
I
long?
was freaking out too because my dad was home and I was like I was doing it outside and I'm like
I think I was there.
I remember I was calling you that day because I was freaking out a little bit.
Okay, I wasn't there then. I was
That
there
was
one of the first times you did it. You said your hand was growing, like, oh, my hand's growing all big or something like that.
Yeah, I remember we were recording it, and I remember there was like a part of it where I had the camera in my hand for so long that it almost felt like the camera was a part of my hand. So when I put it down, I was like, my hand fell off, and I,
That's what it was. Yeah.
I legit looked like I'm like, no, it's still here.
Back to you said you were doing the third time. I forgot where we were going with that,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah. And I was by myself, and I was thinking, I was going through this like repetitive loop. Like I wake up, I go to work, I come home, I do the same thing every day. Like, what is the purpose of my life? Because I was pretty young at the point too. I think this was after my dad had passed, but still, I was like contemplating it like deeply. Like, what is the point of all this? Like, what are we doing here? Am I just living to go to work and come home and just do the same thing every single day and enjoy the weekends? And
yeah.
I think I was young at the time, so I didn't really get too much benefit, I guess, from that experience. I did explore some other ways of thinking, but
So when you first did it, like the first couple times, you don't think you got any benefits from it?
I don't think immediately. And if I did, is probably something like some of them I didn't realize till later in my life.
Is it because you didn't take big enough dose?
It could be
Okay. And would you start
because I
off
think
with like when you first started doing it, like how much did you do?
my very first one was like 1.7 grams, like a half eighth.
Okay.
And that was the one at my house with is my friend Drew, David Weed, and this guy Dennis.
Name dropping them.
Oh,
They're all
nobody knows who David Weed is. Our
I'm
friends
just
do,
kidding.
but
We're gonna
but
show them
yeah, I
this.
mean,
But
I
what
remember
about so
this,
what is your heaviest dose? You said 1.7 grams in the beginning. What was your heaviest dose you've ever done?
7 grams.
7 grams.
Yeah,
Yeah. How much
I
is
think
that? 2/8 or how much is that? Like I'm trying to
yeah,
think.
two
2/8,
eighths.
quarter ounce.
Yeah, I think
That is so much, it seems
most
like.
people freak out like that's a lot to eat, and I'm like, yeah. I was like, well, I've been doing it for a while, so it's
So you build up a tolerance, you
like I
think?
did 5, and I'm like, well, I was fine with 5. And it's funny too because people say like once you start to get cocky and your ego starts to get big, like, oh, like I could do mushrooms, I'm like a professional, I'm a veteran. Like he's like, that's when you get the hard trip and the bad trip that fucking puts you back in your place and humbles you. So I always have that in the back of my mind that like even though like I've done it and I feel like I'm pretty experienced, that
Yeah.
I could have an experience one time that like, oh shit, that's too much. And you know always
So
something to think
what's the
about.
difference like between your trips, like from a 1.7 gram and a 7 gram? Because I remember I was there on one of them when you did a lot, and you're like on
Mhm.
the ground, you're like, oh, you're just like just looking up, and you're just like you weren't there, like you weren't in the same room as us, even though we're in the same room, like, and we were just like, hey, Steven, and you're just like it was crazy.
Yeah.
We recorded it too, but it
I
just
feel
seemed
like
like you weren't there in the same room as us.
with the 1.7, I actually had really good visuals. That was my first time, and it was less like introspective. Maybe too because I was with friends, so we were all laughing at each other and tripping out, and the visuals were really good though.
Yeah.
But once you start, for me at least, this is personal. So I'm sure another guy could be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, 5, 7 grams is nothing. I do 10 or 15." I've
Oh
even heard of
wow,
a
people do
guy.
that.
Yeah, I've heard of a guy doing
What?
40. He was some like
40
old.
grams.
Yeah, I forget his
You gotta
name, but
be
he
kidding
was
me.
like a martial artist, and he would always talk about like I'm
Can you overdose on shrooms? Or I heard
no,
it, you could get like
no.
stuck. Like that's what my dad used to tell me, or somebody used to tell me. You can get stuck where you're like always like forever in the trip or something, or your
Now, I think
brain
I've
gets
heard that. I've
fried.
heard that with acid, but I don't know if that's one of those like fear campaigns they kind of use to
Yeah,
get people to not do it.
that's probably what it is.
Especially like freaking pharmaceutical companies. If you think about it, like they say like psilocybin could do, what like working with a therapist could do like in 10 years. And
Oh,
when they're
okay.
treating people for some things like addiction and stuff, he's like, you give the person this one experience and then they're good for 6 months or up to like a year. So that's bad for big pharma because you don't have to keep coming back for a pill every week or every month. It's like, they want a repeated customer like as much as possible. They don't want to sell you something once a year. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah, they
not
want to
beneficial.
sell you something that they can make, not something you could just go find in a field somewhere.
Yeah, and I know they are trying to do stuff like science wise by taking like extracting certain parts out of it. So I don't know if
Yeah,
it's going to make you not have the experience. Like I feel like that's a big important thing of it. Like
yeah.
you need to have the fear of dying and thinking you're dying, like because that I think that's where it's kind of at, where you have the most growth. It's kind of like with life, like, that's
What
not
kind of
necessarily.
growth do you get from it? Like, because that's a good question. Like, good thing for our podcast here for the listeners, because they're
I
probably
just
thinking like, what is the point of doing it? Just to tripping out, or like if you're getting growth, what kind of growth do you get?
Well, I would say you probably get the most growth or a lot of it from the bad experiences, because the bad experiences, you're kind of confronting something about yourself that you may be trying to run away from.
You're talking about the bad
And
experiences in your life, right?
yeah, or in your habits,
Oh,
or an
okay.
aspect of yourself that you wish was different. Maybe you think you drink too much, or you overeat, or
So trauma or something like that. You
yeah,
could
traumatic experiences,
something from your past.
something that you're basically just trying to suppress. It might bring it up to the forefront of your mind, and it's all you can think about. And if you're not ready to confront it, like, obviously it's going to be a bad trip, because you're facing something that you don't want to face. So I think that is like a big benefit of it. Big benefit of it is it kind of forces you, and it's
Mhm.
not every time you do it you're like, oh, I'm going to be healing my trauma. It's not like that, but you could
Okay.
have those experiences. And I think especially if you have a lot of baggage and a lot of things you haven't dealt with, maybe those experiences are going to be more likely to happen to you.
Yeah.
But when you're going through them, they feel bad, but afterwards you're going to be able to see the benefit of them when you can heal from that part of yourself or change. And you probably won't be able to see the benefits until later. You have to have the
Hmm.
horrible experience where you think you're dying, and then obviously you don't.
It's probably scaring a lot of people. Like they keep saying, "You think you're dying."
Well, it's not for everyone. I'm not condoning it either. Like,
Yeah.
I've been saying it probably for 10 years now, that like psychedelics are going to be the future at some point. Like, because I
Uh,
felt like it benefited me in a lot of ways, and just by getting me to think different, to be more open. Um, I think that was like a big one. Two of the big lessons that I feel like I've learned from doing my little psychedelic journeys is one, how to let go. And that came from an experience where like I said, I was thinking about something. It was almost like the mushroom was forcing me to think about it, and I'm like,
yes, that's what I was gonna bring up. Like you told me that one time I was asking you about it, and you're saying like I don't want to think about this, but it was
Mhm.
forcing you to think about it.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like
it,
me with the blood pressure. It's like I don't want to take it because it's probably high. It's gonna, and then when I
yeah,
take it, so I'm like scared of it. But by
yeah,
doing the shrooms, it's kind of like okay. But like it's like doing I checked my blood pressure and it was good, and I was fine after that. So it's like
nice,
okay,
yeah.
now I know it. Now I know what's happening. But yeah, you go on. You were saying something about that. Like it makes
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. So yeah, I can't remember what the exact thought was, but I just remember like I was like curling up in a ball too. I'm like, oh, I do not like this. And it was like this thought that I couldn't stop thinking about. So eventually, like, I got to a point where I felt so bad that I was like, oh, okay, like, fine, I'll think about it. And like as soon as I had that thought, it was like all this weight was like lifted off my shoulders. And I'm like, that's all I had to do. And it
Yeah.
kind of got me to think, like, all the baggage and shit that we hold on to. If you have the ability to let certain things go, like, then they don't weigh you down anymore.
And it's kind of like what you're saying with a therapist. Like a lot of people have trauma or something wrong with them in their mental, you know, mental health or their in their brain,
Yeah.
something wrong in their head or something that they're really worried about or scared about, or just they lock it away or they just forget about it.
Yeah.
And the therapist, once they go there, they kind of bring that out of them and then they face it and then they kind of heal from that. So it's like the shrooms kind of do that a little bit as well.
Yeah,
Same
and I
sort of
can
thing.
see maybe what the therapist do is would be more therapeutic if you're doing it by yourself and you don't know what to do, you don't know what to expect, you don't know that this thing that you're fighting. That's another thing about like the experience is like a lot of people tell you like go with whatever the shrooms are trying to show you, like go with it. Don't try to
Okay.
fight it, because the more you resist, the more you're going to start getting into a bad trip. And if you don't know that going in, you could just be trying to fight it the whole time and be like, man, that was just 6 hours of hell. I do not recommend it to anyone. I would say I saw Freddy Krueger the whole time,
Yeah, you don't
That's
want that.
probably what your friend
Definitely
did.
not.
Like, he was just resisting the whole time. So once you kind of learn how to let go, like, you can learn how to, even like the experiences that aren't so pleasant, you could kind of give into it and be like, okay, and just let it kind of take over. That's kind of like the best way I could describe it. But yeah, that
Okay,
was one. What was the other
it's
one? So
interesting.
letting go. Um, Shoot, I can't think of the other one off the top of
One
my head.
benefit, you're talking about one benefit, right? Like health, like maybe not a health benefit, but just a benefit. Well, anything that's
More of a
helping your
like mental
mental health,
benefit.
huh?
Yeah, it's more like a mental benefit.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but that's it's not gonna like cure heart disease or anything like that. But you never know
No,
what shrooms could do because there's still a lot of research. But it definitely more of like a
yeah,
mental and like a spiritual kind of thing because that's all part of your health as well too, like your mental and your spiritual. And
yeah.
I'm just trying to
I
think.
think
Like
too.
I heard someone say that I think it was ayahuasca though, not shrooms. That
Hmm.
some they went on a ayahuasca retreat and somebody he said he physically seen it. They went on a whole retreat there with a shaman and all that stuff. And you've done that one time as well. But he said that
Yeah.
someone there at that meeting or at the shaman, meetup doing some psychedelics cured their like hearing. He said they've been deaf in their ear, I don't know, since birth or since like they were young. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden after the psychedelics, they can hear again. And he said, I've seen it. Like I was there and I seen it. They couldn't hear, and then they could hear after that. And he said that's
Yeah.
when he knew of the power of anything is possible and like in life in general, but also just like not just like psychedelics is going to make you anything possible, but just in life, there's always something like someone just got their hearing back. So I was just wondering, can you think you could do stuff like that?
I think it can because I've heard of another story. Someone at work was telling me about it where some woman did like I think it was it 500 times or it was like 50. I can't remember.
That's just so
50,
much to
50,
be a trip
100.
out.
It was like a crazy amount of LSD. Like
Oh,
I think
LSD.
she thought
Okay.
it
Yeah.
was like Coke or something. She snorted it, something like that. But she did like a crazy amount past like the recommended dose, and it like healed something in her brain or something like that. And I was thinking, I was like,
Wow.
maybe
Like a tumor?
that it's like rewiring like your wiring in your brain a little bit somehow that's making
Neuroplasticity.
connections that were for some reason not able to happen before. Maybe it's opening up these areas in your mind. Like I said, or like you
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of science that hasn't been done about it, but the
Yeah.
fact that we are in an age where we are exploring it now makes me excited because
Yeah. Me
before,
too.
like you couldn't even talk about it. It's like
Yeah.
I had had no one to talk about psychedelics with, or you were like pretty much one of the only people on the, and I would always be like, man, they're good for you, not because of like I said, it wasn't to take them and go out and have fun. It was like it changes you, and it changes you in a good way. And I saw the benefits in them like from way back in the day. That's why I'm like, sooner or later, like people and the world is going to catch up to like the potential of the
Yeah.
healing and medicinal, the mental health aspects. Like the world will catch up at some point.
Yeah, and they're starting to legalize it or decriminalize it in some states and stuff like that, and like that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that too because like back
Welcome
in
to
the
my
day,
world, bitches.
yeah, I was always scared like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this because of like in the 70s and 80s, like you're saying, a lot of these, the government was against it. There was a lot of bad things, but my dad did it back in the 70s. He never told me till later on in life. So I was like, oh, you did it? Like maybe that would have got me a little bit more open to it. But I used to always tell you back when we were 6 or 18, 20, when you were doing it, like I'll
Mm-hmm.
do it in my 40s. I'll do it in my 30s because like that's so long. I'll be close to death by then. So I don't care if I die. So I was like, I used to say that, but here I am
Yeah.
40 and I still haven't done it. But yeah, that's why I used to always trip on. I used to also trip out on like it could take 6 hours. So I'd be like, oh, what if I'm flipping out, seeing
Yeah,
crazy
if you got a
stuff, and I
plan
can't
for
get
it.
out of it? I'm stuck in that for 6 hours, especially if it happens in the beginning. But that brings me to the next question. What about microdosing? Because I hear a lot about that. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, one time you did give me like a little candy bar, and had like 3 pieces. I didn't feel anything at all. But
Yeah, I think
there's
the
talking
dose
about
was in and
like you're
out.
talking about the neuroplasticity in your brain, what it does. It could maybe like maybe connect like I don't know, you call circuitry inside your
Mm-hmm.
brain different or something. So a lot of people have been talking about microdosing where you don't really feel an effect, like you don't really get where you're seeing things,
Yeah.
hallucinating, tripping out, seeing things. You probably don't get the effect of maybe dealing with your trauma and stuff like that, but you could still get some circuitry rewired in your brain and maybe sleep better, maybe have cured a little bit of depression or something. So what do you think about the microdosing and how much do you
Um,
need to take to do that?
I guess they could have benefits. I've tried to do it a little bit. I think for me, it's about a gram or so, which people might argue that that is above a microdose.
And Joe Rogan was doing that too. I think a gram, right? Is that,
I'm
yeah,
not sure about his dose, but I think he's probably tried it too much. He's a
yeah,
psychedelic guy. I don't see why he wouldn't have tried it. But
Yeah.
I've tried to just like, oh, I'm gonna go out into a social environment. Let's just try a little bit. And I do feel like it does elevate your mood just because you do feel
Oh, okay.
different. You have like a little bit of a head change, but you're still like you, and you're not dying, and there's no visual. So it's kind of more like a mood elevator at
Okay.
those lower doses.
But do you think it does anything with your circuitry and your like in your brain, like even though you're just microdosing? Because I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, just do like I don't know how much it is, maybe a quarter gram, maybe a half a gram a day. Put it in their smoothie in the morning, and just like their banana smoothie, and throw a little bit of shroom in there, and you don't really feel an effect. So it's kind of like if you're looking for an effect, it's a bummer. But if you're just trying
Yeah.
to think like, oh, maybe it can rewire my brain a little bit, maybe you could take it for a month, microdosing, and then you can start feeling some changes in your life, maybe mentally, maybe sleep wise, maybe I don't know. But I'm
Maybe
not
if
no,
you're like,
I don't really
I
know
was gonna
about
say,
this.
maybe if you're super depressed, it could elevate your mood a little
Okay.
bit enough to like get you out of your funk, and that could be helpful. But I don't think it's not gonna be like the miracle cure where
Okay.
like I think the heavier doses or where it's at, it's gonna like force you to confront some of the things you've been neglecting and pushing
Yeah.
away. And I think those are where you're gonna get the most benefit from. It's because certain aspects, especially if it's a traumatic experience, like you could run away from them for years, drown yourself in alcohol, take some other drugs, and you're basically just pushing it down only for it to pop up later. Where if you can kind of confront it
Yeah.
and process it and deal with it, then you could let it go. You're like, all right, well, I've dealt with this problem, and you know, I don't have to think about it anymore. It doesn't hurt me anymore. I've gotten past it, and now I can move forward with my life, having to leave all the shit that you can heal from it in the past.
Okay. Well, that kind of sums up the microdosing. And I was going to ask you about there's a documentary out there called The Spirit Molecule. I think
Yeah,
it's on YouTube, right?
yeah. DMT, the spirit molecule.
Okay, DMT. So let's like talk about DMT before, like, let's just say it once. I did it once with you. We're drinking one day and you
uh
kind of smoke out of a little meth pipe. I don't know if you guys know what meth pipe looks like, but
Yeah,
it's not
that
meth
was
and we
the
weren't
only
doing
shady
meth,
part about
never
it.
done meth, but you'd put it in there and you just light it up in the bottom and we did it. And to me, DMT was just kind of like a kaleidoscope. I would explain it as like, you're those
Mhm.
little things you look at, little tubes that you look through when you're a kid and you turn them. And when you're turning them, you're
Yeah,
seeing a bunch of different colors. And like, so I hit it. You told me to hit it, the DMT, because, Joe Rogan talks about it all the time. And I was like, there's a big TV on my wall. And the first thing I did is like, it just kind of like turned into like 6 or 7 different TVs. Like they're just like, you just see them just go. And then I just laid down and I just seen a bunch of colors. But some
hmm
people like, say that it does much more than that. Maybe I didn't
hmm
take enough. That's what you said. And the second time, my friend just had some, and I thought it was like some hash, and I just did it, and I didn't know it. So I was just tripping out. All of a sudden,
Oh
I'm like
shit.
chilling, and next thing I'm tripping out, seeing colors, and not knowing where I'm at, or what's happening to me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to smoke some weed and get high.
Yeah, and the next thing you know, I'm tripping out, doing a DMT trip.
Yeah.
But the DMT spirit molecule, what does that talk about in that documentary? Which you guys could check it out if you want to see more about it. But and also, what about DMT? What is that supposed to do to you, or what is it like? Is it different than shrooms or
For
anything?
yeah, for me, I feel like DMT could be like less therapeutic. I feel like I've had some pretty insane experiences with it, and those experiences just made me kind of more open to kind of realizing like I don't necessarily know it all. Because like before, I was like a hardcore atheist, like there ain't no God.
Yeah.
Now that I'm older, I'll kind of entertain the fact that there could be. I'm still more in that there isn't, but
Maybe there's just different realms you're kind of thinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I got to the point where like the experience was just so crazy that I'm like, I remember my very first time, all I could say was like, what the fuck was that? Like, what the fuck was that? Like, it didn't make any sense. Like, and kind of like you were saying, I think the very first time you did it with me is probably you probably didn't get a big enough dose because I feel like there's levels to it. Like if you
Yeah.
do a little bit, it's more visuals and that's kind of it. But most people it's called a breakthrough. I think that's what most people are looking
Seeing
for. And
aliens.
that's when you talk to the aliens. And I don't necessarily, a lot of people will see like I know Joe Rogan talks about like the dancing elves or the machine elves. I think the
I've seen
first
that
person
one.
that kind of bring that up is Terrence McKenna. But I heard Rogan talk about jokers. Other people see like mantis beings. Um, for me, the beings that I saw, they were kind of just like silhouettes of like light and color, and kind of like you're saying with the kaleidoscope, but it wasn't like they were just solid. It was just like fractals. Like everything is
Mm.
moving, all the colors are moving. There was one time I saw a guy, it kind of looked like he might have had dreadlocks, but his dreadlocks had like lines in them, and the lines were like all constantly moving. Um, and then the very first time I remember I felt like I was like sitting down on a couch, and this is with your eyes closed, and it felt
Yeah.
like there was probably like three beings kind of sat to the left of me, and then three of them kind of walked across and sat to the other side of me, and then the one next to me kind of put his arm around me, and we started walking. And it's funny, like the communication while you're there, because it does feel like you're somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's all like telepathic. Like you're not saying anything with your words. It's
Mm.
just like a understanding. And he was kind of walking me. He took me down like a hallway, and he was walking me down the hallway, and the hallway had these doors in them. And as I would walk by, I could look inside. And when I looked in, it was like some crazy psychedelic, full blown shit going on in the door. And I kept walking past, and then I got to one, and I started looking at it, and I'm like, oh shit. And I almost felt like I was getting sucked to it, like
Mm.
sucked into it. And there was a like a being on the other side of it, and he was almost like excited. It was almost like he was presenting me a show. And the fact that I liked the one that I saw, it was almost like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. And
Mm.
a lot of it I can't remember, and a lot
Yeah.
of it is so like basically words can't explain it. It's like when something and so many things are changing so fast, like it's hard for you to wrap your mind around it. Um, it kind of makes me think about in the DMT, a spirit molecule. There was a gentleman in there that talked about, you know, his experience. I think was 15 minutes,
Uh-huh.
and he's like, when I came back, I had to ask the doctors because I had to know like how long was I gone for, and they're like, oh, 15 minutes. And he's like, for a little bit there, I kind of had to like collect myself because he's like, I was gone for 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
And to have 1,000 years of experience in 15 minutes. And he was like,
Wow.
he was like, to say the least, it was profound. And that's another weird aspect of it is like the time. Like time doesn't operate the same when you're in that realm. It's like time gets stretched out to where a 10-minute experience could feel like months, it could feel like years. Like one time I did it, it felt like I was in there for like a lifetime, and I can't
Yeah.
remember all the details of it, but
So 80 years then.
it was a while. And I remember like I almost had to die there in order to come back to this life. And
Well,
I
okay.
remember I was like being consoled. There was like three people around me. I kind of had my head in my lap, and it was almost like they were saying their goodbyes to me. And when I came back, I
Mm.
was like, I was so thankful for my life when I came back. I remember I was telling like my fiance, like, oh, I love you so much. And it was just like, and having that kind of like feeling inside of you, it's not something that you necessarily have every day, this like
Yeah.
overwhelming appreciation for your life, almost like to the point where it could bring you to tears. Like,
Mm.
and I think that
Oh.
could be a therapeutic benefit of it by just kind of connecting with yourself again, and realizing you do have a good life. The fact that you're alive, that you could wake up and brush your teeth and walk and go to work, all those things we kind of take for granted, and certain things kind of remind us from time to time of like how precious your life really is.
It could also like as you're explaining it, I'm thinking about some benefits from this. Like it could kind of show you that maybe like you're not alone. Like a lot of people like you always talk about like just spend time watching sports or news and think about frivolous things in life and just wasting their time on their couch playing video games, just frivolous stupid things. And
Yeah.
you just think this is all my life is like, so it kind of may open your mind and open your mind's eye that there
Hmm.
is maybe some other things out there, and it could open up to a
Exactly.
whole new world of possibilities. Open your mind to be a better, it can make you a better person, because now you're like, okay, now I could accept more people, more beliefs, more ideas, because anything could be possible.
Yeah,
And a lot of people are
exactly.
just in their own narrow thinking, and they just think this is the way it is. If you don't think this way, you're an idiot, you're stupid. Well, now you do the DMT or the shrooms or something like that, and you open your mind, and you can just be a better
Hmm.
person now. You're like, okay, anything's possible. I'm going to be more apathetic, not apathetic, and more accepting to other people's views and ideas, because what do I know? Like I just been
Yeah.
in a world with spirits for a whole 1,000 years in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So like anything could be like your religion could be right, anything could be right, your beliefs could be right. When you're saying something that seems so weird and out of the world to me, that could be true to you or something, So
Mhm.
that could be a benefit. What I think could, is like a benefit, could open up your mind's eye more.
Yeah, that was the second one I was going to talk about, is that it opened up like my perspective. And I've realized that even though I have a perspective, that it could be wrong. So it's, some people, like you said, are kind of closed off and they have narrow thinking, and their way is the right way, and they can't see anything else outside of that. And I feel like mushrooms specifically kind of help me with that, is be more open to other people's viewpoints
Yeah.
and realize that just because I see things a certain way based off my experiences doesn't mean that it is the only way to see something. So if somebody else has a different viewpoint, it's probably because they've had a different life experience. So obviously they're
Yeah.
going to have a different perspective on it.
And like
So
how someone else thinks of you, like if they someone else has their own belief, like not every single person, even Christians, like you go, there's like 20,000 different Christian churches, and you go to one Christian church, they go to another, and they'll be like, oh, you don't do this right, oh, you're believing your preacher is doing this wrong. So even people of the same faith don't even
yeah,
agree, of how the tactics are being taught, how you're living your actual life, what the interpretations mean. So technically, however you believe and however you think is technically going to be wrong to most every single person. Because I
yeah,
used to say, like, if someone believes what I believe 100%, they're just a kiss ass. What do you want from me? Because nobody believes 100% of anybody else's beliefs. So no matter what, your beliefs are basically, it kind of opens up your mind that like, hey, my beliefs are right to me and their beliefs are right to them. So nobody's wrong. We're living in this world. Why the fuck are we here? What
yeah,
is this? Like, what is, I just woke up in this world one day and then we'll be gone forever, like,
yeah,
so what is this? So anything could be possible, especially, and that kind of opens, like doing these things like shrooms and psychedelics and stuff kind of opens your mind to that, especially to people that are very narrow minded as well. Like, so
yeah.
more people need to do shrooms in this world to open up their mind, and that'd be
I
nicer.
think so. Yeah, at least try it once. I was gonna add too about the very first time I did DMT. I did it with like I think it was probably 5 or 6 other people in the room. And I remember when I kind of came back, um,
Mm-hmm.
I opened my eyes and I still had the visuals were still freaking crazy. I remember everything kind of looked plaid, and I was looking at everyone in the room and all their faces were constantly changing. There wasn't like a point where I could be like, oh, that's him. Everyone's faces was changing. And I think
Yeah,
I was like so disconnected from myself. It's like, you lose your, it's like the ego death. I kind of had that with the DMT too, where it's like you're not Steven anymore. You're not, your job, you're not your age, you're not, the son of your parents. It's like you're nothing almost. So I'm like,
yeah,
just looking at everyone's faces changing. So I'm assuming that my face is changing too. And I was like, I wonder who I'm gonna be when this stops. Like
mm-hmm.
seriously contemplating the thought that I could potentially take someone else's, like be somebody else when all this ends, like when the faces stop. Like it was almost
Yeah,
like a gambling game or something. Like who am I gonna
mm-hmm.
be when this ends?
Huh.
But it's that's fun to think about for me, because I'm like, just imagine being so disconnected to yourself that you could, like, you're actually considering that you might be someone else. Like you're no attachment to yourself whatsoever. And I think having that
Yeah,
experience you could be liberating in its own right, because like I said, we carry a lot of the baggage from our past, and to kind of create a separation in that, even if it's for a split second,
mm-hmm.
to realize that there's this spot in your consciousness that is just pure awareness, and without all the attachments to your life that you have, like that could be like, lifting that burden off your shoulders, even if it's just for a little bit, to get a glimpse that it's possible. I think could be beneficial for other people.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Man, it's crazy. So you've also done ayahuasca one time. You went to a retreat somewhere and did it with a couple people and stuff. What is the difference between the three? Like, do you get like different effects from like the ayahuasca to the shrooms or the
Yeah.
DMT, or like is it different? Opens up different parts of your mind? Do you think? Does it rewire your circuitry different? What is? Can you explain a little bit of like the feeling of those three differences?
From the ayahuasca mushrooms and DMT.
Yeah, yeah, the different.
So ayahuasca, that's more it's kind of similar to psilocybin in the
How long
fact
does
that
that one last to wear off too? Like, because I know
um
DMT is like 6 to 10, 15 minutes.
yeah,
Shrooms is around
yeah, it
six
could be
hours or
very
so to
fast.
10. Huh?
It could feel fast, or for the people that are watching you, it's fast, but for you, it's a
Well, what
lifetime.
about the ayahuasca? How long does that one?
That one's like a 6 to 8 hour, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
pretty
So go,
long,
yeah.
but it's more of like a kind of like a gradual come up and come down. Where
Oh, okay.
DMT, you're here 1 minute, and then boop,
Yeah,
you
DMT
smoke
didn't
it,
last
and
long for
then you're
me.
gone. Like you're just not even like there was one time I tripped with my eyes open and I couldn't see anything that was like in my room that I was in. Like
Yeah,
it removes you so far from this reality that it almost
that's
feels
wild.
more real than this freaking reality to an
Oh yeah,
extent. More
that's
vivid, it's
wild.
more vibrant. You know,
Yeah,
there's beings dancing and you're communicating with, well, it feels like you're communicating with something else outside of yourself. I don't know if that's a trick of the mind or, we don't know. We can only make assumptions, but it feels like
yeah.
you're communicating with
So
something
the
else.
difference between the three are
Um, I feel like psilocybin visually and ayahuasca kind of similar. Ayahuasca eyes closed visuals were more vivid, more intense. I remember seeing. I almost felt like I was like in a gnome world for a second, where
mm,
there's just these little beings kind of hopping around singing a song. And when I did
that
it
sounds funny.
at that, I don't know if you, I just call it like
Sounds like a
ayahuasca
Oompa
visually.
Loompa, like a
Yeah, it
Charlie
was weird.
Factory.
But they were playing like music. There was a guy walking around every so often with like sage. I think he's burning sage. And it felt like whenever I would smell the sage, it would bring back a part of the trip. Like when I first smelt it, whatever I was experiencing,
Yeah.
when I smelled the sage, it almost like it brought me back to that.
Mm.
And that was a different experience too, because there's other people, they kind of did like little cool little tricks. They had something called rape. It was like this, I don't know if it's like some powder they blow up your nose, but it was
Oh
through like
wow.
a bird's a hollow bird bone, and
Okay.
I saw these other people doing it, so I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, can I try that? So the guy's like, yeah, go ahead, sit down. So he kind of tells me what to do, and he like blows this powder, and it just goes right up into your brain. And I was telling them after, I'm like, it was weird because when you did it, it was like all my thinking, everything just went like silent. And I was like, I
Uh,
was kind of able to stretch like the nothingness of it. I don't know how to explain it. It was just kind
uh,
of weird because having a moment where you're not thinking, you're just observing. And I was able to, it felt like I was stretching it for a long time, but who long? It's probably a few seconds.
and then so
And then DNT, I don't know. I feel like that one's,
can you
you know,
see like the spirits like you're talking about in DNT on the other two?
I'm sure you could, like I didn't. And I'm not sure if different brews, different ratios of the plant to the leaf or the leaf to the bark could
Yeah.
maybe have different effects. So I'm not sure what these people had. I found them on a Facebook group, and she was my girlfriend at the time. She thought I was crazy for going. She's like, "You're going out in Joshua Tree with who?" I'm like, "I don't know. These people, they're doing some
People like me.
ayahuasca ceremony. I
People like me,
wanna I
trippy
wanna
people
try
like that.
it."
Yeah.
So I was like, I went out there.
Sounds like a good party time. Yeah.
There was a weird part of it too, because throwing up and having diarrhea is a common side effect to have from it. I didn't get any of that. Um, but I remember when I was laying down and I could hear people like getting up to throw up, and in a weird way, it was like I got relief from it. It's like he threw up and now I feel better. And the guy was like, yeah, it's kind of weird
The
when
energy.
we're in these groups like this. He's like, we kind of all are connected, like on some
Yeah.
level. But I always thought that was crazy because the guy throwing up, I'm like, oh yeah, that feels good.
Well, how close are you sitting next to each other? Are you sitting pretty
We were,
close?
yeah, we're probably
Maybe it's your
maybe,
force field because your force field is around each human.
yeah,
Maybe
the
it
like magnetic
interconnects.
field that I think our
Yeah.
heart makes it. Our heart makes like a magnetic field
Yeah.
around.
So maybe you're connected that way somehow.
It could be. We're probably like, a foot or two from each other in like sleeping bags in the circle.
Oh, okay.
And remember this one specific point where this guy, he gave me like a quartz crystal or something to hold, and I
Uh-huh.
was holding it. And I remember when I was holding it, I kind of got this imagery of like some like Renaissance looking woman, like orange hair, and it was almost like a portrait, but it's like she was in front of me, and it was almost like I felt, I'm not saying it's true or anything, but I felt like the crystal that I was holding, like she was holding it at one point too, and it somehow got to me, and I felt like there was just a connection for a little bit. I'm not sure what that was about, but I do remember that aspect of it.
Okay, well, we're running low on time. It's in 45 minutes. We're gonna do this on a 45-minute
I could
podcast,
talk
but
about this all night.
you can talk about this all night, guys. Trust me. Like we used to hang out,
Maybe
and
we'll
this is
do a part
all he
two.
would talk about. So we had
We'll
to
do
do
a
a
part
podcast about
two
it.
if any of the listeners
We
want to
can
hear.
do a part two, but um, let's think about like I want to ask you one more question. That one day I was chilling with you, you'd done like a lot. I think me and your fiance were chilling, drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and you were just on the ground. Like, explain a little bit about how that one was. It was like 7 grams or something you did. It was of shrooms, and I just wanted to trip out on what did you see or do on that time because you were kind of like. And then also another time I wanted to explain. We'll just do it for like another 5 minutes here.
All
Um,
right.
one time we thought you almost died when doing DMT because you were like, oh, and your
Oh
eyes literally
yeah,
rolled
I
back
forgot
behind
you
your
were
head
there.
because you wanted to do like an extreme amount. You're like, I'm gonna do a big amount, take a big old hit. So those 2 times, like you said, you couldn't even remember anything because we literally
Yeah,
thought
I
you
like
died.
blacked
Your
out.
your nephew was upset and left. Like you guys are all doing it, having fun. You're all telling me to do it for the third time, and I was like, I've ever done it. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. Like you guys could have your fun, but your eyes like rolled back behind your head, and me and your fiance looked at each other like, oh man, we might have to call the ER right here, like this ambulance, because we thought you died. So what are those two experiences like? And then we'll call it a show, and maybe we'll do a part two.
What was the first one?
The one
Oh,
time that you
the
did
mushroom one.
the shrooms like 7 grams, and then the one time you did DMT where you like basically almost died. It seemed like in real life, not in the spirit world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember the shroom one was a trip. Just the visuals, because I remember at that point too. I kept coming, like I would have moments like I think I started it off in my room alone. Like I did the Terrence McKenna, the heroic dose, 5 grams and silent darkness. So I'd go into my room, I had my eye shades, and I was just trying to take the journey inward. But I got to a point where, because I knew you were there, I was like, I wanted to come out. So eventually I kind of just went with how I felt and I came out. But I remember I kept going back and forth to the room. And I think I might have been crawling
Yeah,
because
yeah, you were crawling on the ground.
at
Yeah,
that dose, like walking was very difficult. The visuals
that's
were pretty
wild.
crazy. Even with my eyes closed, the visuals were pretty crazy. But I remember I had a plant in the corner. I was tripping out on that for a little bit. It's kind of hard to describe the way it changes colors and it kind of bubbles. But yeah, I was just changing different colors and it looked like it was moving. So I was just kind of looking at that. I remember I grabbed like Valerie's hand too. I don't know why. There's been a few times where I've tripped and I would like touched her hand and I'm like, I just feel like this weird connection between me and her. It's like I don't know really how to describe it. It's like it almost feels like we're one person. Like I'll just be rubbing her hand and I'm like, it's like hard for me to feel like where I stop and she begins.
He's
It's a
trying to be
weird
cute right
feeling.
now, guys. I'm just kidding.
No, I've done
No,
that
I
a
feel you.
few times. Uh, and then the
Yeah,
DMT one, there's a couple
that
of
one was
things that,
crazy.
yeah, there's a couple of things I would have done different. Like we were drinking that night, probably not a good thing.
Oh,
And then I
okay.
remember I wanted to sit on the couch, but somebody talked me into sitting in the chair. Because DMT is one of those ones, it's almost like you pass out, like you hit it and then you're gone. Uh,
Yeah.
so you're not really in control of your body. I think it would have been better if I could have just like laid back in the couch and just kind
Uh-huh.
of relaxed. But since I was in the chair, I kind of fell forward, and I think Mike or someone had to catch me, and then I'm on the ground sideways.
Yeah.
Uh,
But your eyes rolled back behind your head, and you said you didn't remember anything. Like it tripped you
yeah,
out. Tripped me out.
when I was
Like, oh
coming
fuck.
out of it, like the first thing I remember is that I saw like this like flower of life pattern
Uh-huh.
over everything, and it was like rainbow. I see that happening, and then I black out, and then I remember coming out of it, and that was the experience.
You didn't even get to the next realm. Like didn't see no aliens. And if you did, it might have been a
If I did, I don't
lifetime.
remember.
It might have been a whole
I
entire
did.
lifetime, and it was just so long your brain can't like even comprehend that much information.
That was, yeah. That was one of the ones too. I remember when I did open my eyes eventually. I remember Mikey, like I was on the ground and Mikey had his hand reaching down to like here, like get up. Um but when I first opened him, I could not see him. It was like eventually I kind of there's some like crazy psychedelic visual thing happening, and then his silhouette kind of like started phasing in to the
Mm.
visuals, and then I could kind of make out like a silhouette. I couldn't tell it was him, but like a silhouette reaching for my hand. So I grabbed it, and then yeah, it's still that took me a little bit to kind of come back from it. I don't know if it was the alcohol, like we were
Yeah.
taking shots of whiskey
And
that
you were
night.
taking other hits before that as well. That wasn't the first hit you took of
Mm-hmm.
the DMT.
Yeah, that was another thing is that I had I kept packing the bowl. So it's like I packed, a certain amount for myself, but I don't think it was cleared from the hits before.
Yeah.
And I think I just did one big fat one. And that's another thing too. If you do too much, I hear that's common too. You will black out and you just don't remember it. It's like I
Yeah.
don't
That's
know if
what
it's
kind of
your
what happened.
your brain trying to like to protect you from the experience, or I'm
Yeah.
not sure what it is, but maybe it's too much for your body to handle. But
But you've done it
I've heard
many
it's like
times.
a sweet spot.
You've done it many times. You're still here. You're still a deep thinker. You're still sharp. So,
Thank you, thank you.
so it's like, I guess it's not that bad. So, with our final thoughts here, like, I'm going to say it sounds trippy. It's very interesting. And I'm still like interested in like what kind of medical research are going to come up with.
Mm-hmm.
I know that
Same
like
here.
shrooms can sometimes, they say that the compounds in them that break down all matter in life, the fungi, can actually maybe like clean up oil from beaches because it's so like powerful. So it's like really interesting and all the stuff that shrooms could do and
Mm-hmm.
what the future holds. And I just hope that it becomes legal so more people could research it and the stigma gets off of it. And as of people doing it, like if you hear this and you like it and you think it's cool and you think there might be some medical benefits, maybe to help your alcoholism, or maybe you're open up your mind to new things. And also, you could party with it as well. But I think the interesting aspects to me are the what it can do maybe for the environment and what it could do for like the human in general. And what are your final thoughts before we head out of here?
Yeah, I've always had the thought that if you're trying to treat like a mental illness, like what better way than with something that actually alters the mind a little bit. And
Makes
there
sense.
are pros and cons. There's certain people who shouldn't do it. Like if you're a schizophrenic, it could create an episode.
Yeah.
So there are people in the world that shouldn't do it. So I'm not saying make sure you're safe. Make sure you don't you're not predisposed to having one of these psychological bad events happening to you. And but I think for the most part, like for me personally, I feel like I've gotten a lot of benefits from them. They
Hmm.
open my mind, teach me how to let go a little bit, and don't be a know-it-all, because even though we have our perspectives, there's other perspectives that are equally right from that perspective. So I think psychedelics are going to be part of the future. That's my take on that.
And one last quick question, you can answer it real quick. Did it help you with your passing of your dad at all? Psychedelics.
Mm, no, maybe not in the immediate moment, but maybe in the past it did kind of help me to be able to kind of take that journey within yourself and kind of confront some of these things. And maybe I never did it because I was drinking every weekend and never allowed myself the opportunity to do
Makes
it.
sense.
So once I became sober,
Mhm.
a lot of these things popped up. And I think I don't know if I told you, but I think the first month that I quit drinking, I think I cried every day for like a month straight, is because, I was thinking about my dad a lot, and I was at a place where I wasn't happy, and just little things and things I would think about would just kind of get me into that mood. And I felt like just let it out. Like there ain't no sense in holding it in. I'm by myself. I'm driving to work or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think they benefited me ultimately, long term wise. Maybe next time we could talk about I know they did a study with like cancer patients, and especially the ones that are near dying,
Yeah.
and it had a big impact on them, helping them to be able to let go and to kind of transition in more peacefully, instead of just giving them
Oh yeah.
morphine and letting them die that way.
Yeah, I did hear
Kind of
that.
gave
It,
them
it
like
helps you with death. If you're
yeah.
really afraid of death, that could be something as well, a benefit. We got to throw that in there. So that's a good one that you threw that in there.
Hmm. maybe part two. Or
Yeah, we got to do part two. Like, let us know in the comments of YouTube or on Spotify. You could put a question, like you could answer it on there. What do you think about this episode? So to go look for that and tell us if you want a part two or some questions you have for it, either on YouTube or Spotify. Those are the two ones that you could ask to answer, put comments on there, and tell us what you think about this episode. And tell us what you would like to hear more of on part two, and also share this with a friend and like it and make sure you subscribe. And other than that, that will be the end of the episode. And we're glad you're here and we're glad you listened and
yeah, thanks for listening.
keep living that whole life.
Living that whole life. Hoo, 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 hoo.